Hello, welcome to Press TV's special coverage of the run-up to Egypt's first presidential election after the ouster of Hosni Mubarak. Voting, if you're not aware, will begin on May 23rd and the 24th to choose who will succeed Hosni Mubarak, who was ousted from power last year. And that's in exactly 14 days from now when this historic vote is going to take place. That is, if Egypt does not face any hurdles in the run-up to the elections. Take, for example, yesterday when the Presidential Committee or the Vote Committee stopped preparation for the vote since it said it was insulted by some members of Parliament. Well, in this segment, we'll focus on issues surrounding the candidates and their platform. We're also going to take a look at what has affected and influenced Egypt in the past decades, namely the Camp David Treaty. And at this point, let's look at what the Camp David Treaty is all about. We're going to run some of the highlights for you, in which we're going to review them right now. Well, as you can see over here, U.S. brokered peace deal signed by Egypt and Israel back in '78. It involved two frameworks, of which we're going to talk about that, peace in the Mideast and peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, just a couple of them. Here, it's talking about some additional details, how Egypt received over $1 billion in U.S. aid each year. It gave Israel, well, let's look at this one. Camp David Accords undermined Islamic Arab front against Israel. Don't forget, Egypt was the first Arab country to actually, through this Camp David Treaty, have a relation with Israel, which in a sense then showed that it recognized Israel. Moving on to some of the other highlights of this Camp David Treaty, aside from what we're looking at right now, we're going to go into pre-revolution Egypt. If we can roll that so we can see what it was in terms of that, which was basically a popular refusal of the Accords. That means that there were, prior to the revolution, there were many committees that were formed to basically rebuff this normalization, as they called it, of ties with Israel. In terms of what Egyptians want, that is very much one of the key issues that concerns Egyptians. And basically, based, of course, on polls, but on the sense on the street, and that is that Egyptians want this to not only be annulled, but it should be put up for a referendum. And, of course, some of the candidates are running on that platform, of which it's a mixed bag. And we're going to discuss that with the guests that we're going to have in this. And to round up the gains and losses for Egypt regarding this, well, we're going to hone in on a couple of those, such as the $1 billion that the U.S. gives to Egypt, of which their assistance in that regards also meant political influence of successive governments that came into power, of the governments of Egypt under Hosni Mubarak, what that meant. Well, at this point, let's go on to what Egyptians, which is what should be important, think about this treaty and what it means in relations of Egypt for the future.
مصر مع إسرائيل أساسا إسرائيل مش دولة عشان مصر تعترف بيها وده في كيان كل مصري لو قلت له إسرائيل إيه هيقول لك إسرائيل دي ملهاش أي وجود عندنا هي إسرائيل كيان محتل.
النظام كان ماسك البلد من حديد فما كانش فيه تعبير عن الرأي يعني فما كناش نقدر نوصل لمرحلة إن احنا نقول إيه رأينا في الاتفاقية خاصة إن الشعب بيبقى مجند في حاجات كتير. فحاليا طبعا احنا من حقنا ان احنا اسرائيل زي ما بتعمل لنا تهديدات من حقنا برضو احنا كمصريين ان احنا نعمل لها تهديدات.
مش مع اتفاقيه كامب ديفيد خالص ان هي تبقى لسه متواجده يعني حتى بعد وجود الرئيس.
لا علاقه مصر واسرائيل احنا بنقول يا ريت ان احنا نبقى ايد مصريه ونجمع نفسينا بايد مصريه ونتعامل كمصر ولا دعوه باسرائيل ولا باي حد من بره.
The views of Egyptians on this relationship that Egypt has had with Israel. Well, let's bring in our correspondent, Karim Gamaluddin, in order to get an update of the day's developments in Egypt. Karim, we understand that perhaps the candidacy of one of the candidates, you tell us who, might be in jeopardy based on one of the laws in terms of banning former remnants of the regime, the 10-year-old law. Tell us more about that.
Yes, the State Council Administrative Court has ruled today that the military-appointed High Electoral Commission has misused its powers when it has referred the political isolation law or the political disfranchisement law to the Supreme Constitutional Court. The ruling of the State Council's Administrative Court casts doubts over the eligibility of the presidential candidate Ahmed Shafiq, who was Mubarak's last premier and was barred from the presidential race and then was reinstated by the military-appointed High Electoral Commission. And to move on with the sentiments of the Egyptian towards the Israeli relations, and many Egyptians are not supporting or are against Israel, which was Mubarak's longtime dictator, close ally. But this is refused by the Egyptian general public. So let's take a look at what Egyptians think about the Camp David peace treaty exactly a couple of weeks before the planned first post-revolution presidential election.
Egyptian presidential hopefuls, without exception, have all said they intend to review the terms of Camp David, which are perceived as crippling. Leading candidates like Amr Moussa has said he would consider the peace deal with its existing conditions dead, while other presidential frontrunners like the Brotherhood's Mohammed Morsi and former Brotherhood member Abdul Menem Abdel Fattah has mentioned they intended to modify Camp David.
This decision is not only for the president. It was in the past the presidents who are ruling everything and who is taking every decision in the country. It was in the past, and now after the 25th of January revolution, it is the voice of the people, the voice of the parliament, the voice of the government or the cabinet and the president.
Observers say Egypt's presidential candidates have realized that Egyptian citizens who angrily stormed the Israeli embassy in September and who have always refused any form of normalization with the occupiers of Palestine and Arab lands are now as anti-Israeli as ever, feeling that the new Egypt should deal for once with Israelis and U.S. arrogance.
We will not accept the Camp David Accord, and the Zionist entity has to abide by the 1967 borders. And more importantly, they have to stop their extensive aggression against the people of Palestine.
Even the country's ruling junta has coordinated with the Israelis for increasing the number of Egyptian troops in Sinai border areas in order to fully control the volatile area. It seems that in the new Egypt, and for once, citizens and rulers alike will be on the same wavelength when it comes to the Israeli aggressor.
In line with the heightening anti-Israeli sentiments in Egypt, many here are hoping that Egypt's upcoming president will suspend all ties with Israel. The Israeli ambassador to Cairo exports to Israel. Press TV.
Okay, let's discuss this with our guests. We have Gamal Ziara, who's a managing editor-in-chief at Al-Ahram, a newspaper, who joins us from Cairo momentarily. We also have from London Adel Lafti, who's a writer and a journalist. Let's start with you, Adel Lafti. Let's look at the candidates, how the future ties with Israel. Start off with, some polls are indicating Amr Moussa to be in the lead. And he said the Camp David Accord, dead, no longer exists, belongs to the bookshelf. Tell us if he's going to keep to his promise, even though he has said, but, and I quote, I respect all Egyptian legal commitments, including the Egyptian-Israeli agreement, as long as the other party respects it and it does not affect Egypt's exercise of its sovereignty.